The Baishaling Incident, also known as the Battle of Passaleão, was a conflict between Portugal and China over Macau in August 1849. The Chinese were defeated in the only military confrontation, but the Portuguese called off further punitive measures after a naval tragedy killed about 200 sailors. The Portuguese governor, João Maria Ferreira do Amaral, had adopted a confrontational stance towards the Chinese, as displayed in the earlier revolt of the faitiões. In early 1849 he proposed to extend a road from the walls of the city to the Chinese border. This required the relocation of some Chinese graves. Further, he ordered Chinese residents within the walls to pay taxes to the Portuguese authorities and no longer to the imperial mandarins. He also placed strict controls on the launcher traffic and tried to stop the mandarins from collecting customary dues from the tanker people who lived on boats in the harbor. Since Macau was a free port, the mandarins retained two customs houses, one at the inner harbor and one at the outer harbor. They refused to close them at Amaral's request, so on the 5th of March he proclaimed them closed. The mandarins still did not budge, and on the 13th of March, they were forcibly expelled. Amaral informed the mandarins of Zhongshan that if they ever visited Macau they would be received as foreign dignitaries. By all these moves the mandarins, and the Chinese state, stood to lose significant revenue. The Chinese inhabitants of Macau were inflamed. Placards offering a reward for the head of Amaral were posted in Guangzhou. The governor, however, had achieved his goal of Macanese independence from China. For the legations of Spain, the United Kingdom and the United States accredited to China had chosen to stay in Macau while awaiting permission to enter China. Matters came to a head on the 22nd of August, when Amaral and his aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Geronimo Pereira Light, left the town through the Portas do Cerco to give arms to an elderly Chinese woman whom Amaral was supporting. The two were only a few hundred yards within the gate when a Chinese coolie frightened Amaral's horse with a bamboo pole and signaled to his comrades in hiding. The one-armed governor held the reins with his teeth in order to draw his pistol. Before he could do so, he was set upon by 7 Chinese, armed only with edged weapons, and dragged from his horse. Light, also armed, was dismounted and fled on foot, intending to collect the reward in Guangzhou. The assassins cut off Amaral's head and remaining hand as proof. The Portuguese authorities retrieved the rest of his corpse and traced a blood trail out to the gate. The assassination was well known in Guangzhou, where the evidence had been widely seen and the perpetrators openly bragged. When the Portuguese, supported by the Americans, British, French and Spanish, protested, the assassins escaped to the Chinese government. The latter claimed complete ignorance of the event. Since Amaral had earlier dissolved the Senate of Macau, there was a power vacuum after the assassination. Some senior officials requested assistance from Britain and the United States. The Plymouth and Dolphin took up defensive positions in the harbor, while HMS Amazon and Medea landed some Royal Marines to defend Portuguese civilians and British nationals. In the aftermath of the assassination, sensing Portuguese weakness, the Chinese moved troops closer to the city. On the 25th of August, the guns of the Imperial fort at Baishaling, about 1 mile north of the city, opened fire on the walls of Macau. The field artillery and naval guns of the Portuguese returned fire, but could do little damage to the Chinese fort. With about 400 men and 20 cannons, the Chinese greatly outnumbered and outgunned the Portuguese garrison. In this situation, Vicente Nicolau de Mesquita, an artillery sub-lieutenant, volunteered to lead an attack on Baishaling with a company of about 36 men and a howitzer. The howitzer got off only 1 shot before its carriage broke down, but the shell struck the fort dead on, causing panic among the Chinese troops. Mesquita then led a charge, and the surprised Chinese broke and ran. Part of the Chinese panic seems to have come from the sighting of a black Mozambican soldier that had scaled the walls, believing him to be a devil. Now in control of the fort but unable to hold it, Mesquita had the guns spiked and exploded the powder magazines. Although Mesquita was treated as a hero in the 20th century, both in Portugal and in Macau, he was not immediately recognized for the valor of his actions. After their initial victory, the Portuguese received support from Britain, France and the United States. They brought in reinforcements from Portuguese India and metropolitan Portugal. Following negotiations, the Chinese agreed to return Amaral's head and arm in January 1850, and the governor's entire body was returned to Lisbon for burial. The Portuguese proceeded to assemble a naval flotilla for a punitive expedition. The frigate Dona Maria II, the corvettes Iris and Dom João and some armed launches gathered in the harbour on the 29th of October 1850 to fire a salute in honour of King Ferdinand II, on his birthday. After the salute, and just before the local elites could board the Dona Maria II for the celebrations, the frigate exploded. Sabotage by the keeper of the magazine with a grudge against the captain was blamed. Nearly 200 men died and the expedition was called off. A memorial to the victims of the Dona Maria II tragedy, erected in 1880, still stands by the site of the old fort in Taipa.